Hi people, Morino Ravenberg here. Welcome, I'd say. This is going to be the first installment segment, or in any case, the first video on, yeah, on story time, if you will, specifically. I recorded a video, I think yesterday, yesterday. I recorded that video yesterday. In which I asked you guys, I asked people that follow me, and just generally speaking, anyone that visits and views my channel, on what their thoughts were on this subject of me simply creating videos on hauntings and paranormal happenings in my immediate area, for one, as well as in general to a lesser extent. Specifically my immediate area or my location of residence, current location of residence, Suriname. And yeah, I have to say that interest has been more than adequate. In total, I've had 10 upvotes last time I checked on the video, despite the fact that it was only published yesterday. So there are enough people that have an interest in story time, as I call it, of course. If you haven't seen that video, then just consult the video story time, yay or nay. It was kind of a poll video in which I asked people what their thoughts were, because I was not going to create this series, or I wasn't going to record this series in which I talk about hauntings from a local perspective, as well as paranormal happenings locally. I was just not going to talk about it if it's not worth my time and effort, and it's not worth my time and effort if people don't have an interest in it. But yeah, people do have an interest in it, so yeah, here we are. Here I am, and here you are. That was just an introduction, the first introduction. Now there's going to be a shorter introduction. For those of you that aren't aware of it, I live in a country called Suriname. That's spelled Suriname. It's part of the three Guyanas, and it's in South America. It used to be a Dutch colony. It's a former Dutch colony, and in reality, it still is, more or less. It's independent on paper, but only on paper. In reality, it's still heavily reliant upon the Dutch for the most part. And as I've stated a million times before, especially people that have known me for years and people that follow me, but this is more for the new people. The country I live in is an absolute nightmare. The country I live in, brutally put, is a shit show. It's a work less than nothing banana republic, and that's why the absolute majority of you out there have never ever heard of it. The only reason a lot of people have told me that they're even familiar with Suriname is because of me, because they've met me. Not to toot my own horn or to come off as arrogant, but as I said so many times, I don't give a rat's ass who thinks I'm arrogant. So yeah, in any case, Suriname, like most similar locations, also has a rich history dating back to colonial times, especially from an occult perspective or from a paranormal perspective. Hauntings, despite the fact that the country is so small, population density-wise, there are numerous hauntings, there have been numerous hauntings and cases of possession and you name it, or everything relating to black magic or folk magic in general. And I'm simply going to discuss these, bring a couple of these matters to light. I was born here, so yeah, I am more than familiar with the country from a geographical perspective, social perspective, you name it. And yeah, that's why I know so much about it, because of course, I share no love for my location whatsoever. I absolutely despise it. People that know me know that I absolutely hate the country, okay, for reasons I already mentioned. It's the absolute opposite of what I am and who I am. The average person here is, imagine someone who's the exact opposite of me, pretty much, in terms of development, in terms of overall value and self-worth. And then, yeah, you have an idea on what the average Surinamese person is like. In any case, nevertheless, the country from a geographical perspective as well as an occult perspective is very interesting. And I'm simply going to share several stories. That was the second introduction. Now let's get down to it. The first story that I'm going to share here is about a local phenomenon called Kantasi, or Kantasi. In English, you'd say Kantasi or Kantasi. That's spelled Kanpasi or Kanpamasi. Yeah. I had difficulty spelling it for a second. In any case, I'm just going to stick with Kantasi or Kantasi as it's called locally. And long story short, this is the phenomenon of a low-level astral entity that is similar to a wild animal. Okay, and you also have spirits that not all spirits. Before I continue, I need to state, in addition to what I just said, that not all spirits are well developed and possess a higher level of consciousness and are more advanced than human beings. I already created a video in the past in which I discussed astral parasites. These are the lowest of the lowest astral entities that feed off of human misery. And there are also similar low-level astral entities that are like animals. They possess a limited amount of consciousness. And the Kantasi spirit, no offense meant to that spirit, of course, is one of them. And it's a local phenomenon here, and how it exactly works, quote unquote works, so to speak, is that spirit resides in termite nests or in termite hills. Usually these termites, they either build their nests or hills on the ground or close to a tree, for obvious reasons, since the tree is made up of wood. And this spirit has a tendency to take up refuge in said termite nest, and you'll usually find these nests in which a Kantasi spirit lives deep inside the jungle or in a secluded location, a location where barely anyone goes. There have been multiple sources and multiple occasions, and I've heard from multiple people that they've come across something like this, but these are usually people that for example, these are lumberjacks, people that really go deep into the jungle, you name it, hunters. But locally at least, this is most likely the case globally, or also the case in the rest of practically any tropical country. But at the very least locally, the average person here that's over 40 years old is familiar with the Kantasi. I mean, the younger generation, maybe not so much if they're superficial airheads, but people are in any case familiar with the lore, and they'll usually tell you that you'll only find this kind of spirit hiding in a termite nest deep inside the jungle or in a secluded location, in any case, in a termite nest. And yeah, the way it works too is that this spirit, spirits in general, especially such a lower level astral entity, is like a wild animal. It doesn't like to be disturbed. It just wants to live in peace and in quietness and in solitude. So usually when an area gets deforested or when there's too much commotion, either caused by people or wild animals nearby, or when its habitat is simply exposed to the elements too much, for example, if a part of its habitat burned down, then that Kantasi spirit is automatically going to leave that termite nest and seek refuge elsewhere. But if you come close to that nest and if you disturb that nest, then you'll immediately see that something abnormal will happen, something that termite nests, that can't possibly happen. You'll see things happening for no rational explanation or reason. For example, the nest bleeding out all of a sudden. That termite nest in which that spirit is occupying, in which that Kantasi spirit is living, will automatically start to foam heavily. It's like some red liquid or outright blood will come out of that nest, and you, as a so-called intruder, will start to feel nauseous, and a couple of other mild misfortunes may befall you. It's similar to if you were to interrupt a bee's nest, for example, or if you were to disturb a bee's nest. Whenever that Kantasi spirit feels threatened, it is going to try to shoo you away. It's going to try to chase you away by intimidating you. You might also smell a stench or a raw thingy, or a taste, or immediately get the taste of rotten food in your mouth and similar And it's also said that it's not recommended if you're near such an area to urinate or defecate, because it basically sees that as soiling your. It's not the only spirit; multiple spirits do that. It basically sees it as soiling its territory, you soiling its territory. And things might happen like you not being able to urinate or defecate anymore, you being constipated without any rational reason. Even if you were to seek medical help, they wouldn't be able to explain it. And it just goes on. And yeah, you can also see. You can also see a Kantasi nest, or a nest in which a Kantasi spirit used to be hiding. I have such a video when I visited a Native American village here called Casipora. That's pronounced Cassipora. And what I'm explaining right now is the same thing. I do the same thing in the video as I'm doing right now. The only difference is that in the video I speak Dutch, and in the video I came across two nests. One was closer to the Indian village, so that Native American village, Casipora, and it was abandoned. That there was no Kantasi. There hadn't been a Kantasi in it for years. That Kantasi had abandoned that nest a good while ago. But the first one that you'll see in the video, you can find it in the link in the description below. The first nest that you'll see when I first start talking in Dutch, or when I start speaking in Dutch, is that one is relatively speaking fresh, because I remember when I went near that nest, I still felt remnants of energy and slight nausea, etc. And my intuition automatically also told me, as well as spirits that I work with, that a Kantasi had occupied that nest, but it left because because it kept getting disturbed too many times by people coming to throw garbage and whatnot, by doing miscellaneous things. Because there's a walkway there. The local village created a walkway there. I don't know what they use it for exactly, but it's on the edge of where the jungle or the bush begins, and where an open area that has been burned down either naturally through excessive heat, so just forest fires, or just one forest fire, or whether the villages themselves burned it down, one of the two. In any case, it felt disturbed and threatened by that, but the nest is relatively fresh, if you will, quote unquote fresh, and my senses told me that it's been half a year to a year that Kantasi spirit has left that nest. Keep in mind, that's the first thing you see. The first termite nest that you see lodged up against a tree, that's the one I'm referring to. And the second nest that I display in that video is the one on the ground itself, one on the ground. That one is closer to the Native American village, like I said. And that one has already been abandoned for years. We're talking about 5 to 10 years, roughly estimated, you name it. So that one had no energy whatsoever. But yeah, that's in essence what the Kantasi spirit is, I think that even people in Brazil and anywhere near the Amazon rainforest, or anywhere in a tropical climate, multiple people have to be aware of it. So they maybe, and most likely, simply give it different names, but in essence it's the same thing. But locally, according to local people here, according to the Surinamese, they call it Kantasi. Again, Kantasi. And it's simply a lower level astral spirit that behaves kind of tribal. It simply seeks up refuge in, I don't know if it seeks up refuge only in termite nests, but termite nests are the most common place where it goes to hide. And nowadays, if you want to find one in which that spirit actually resides, you'll really have to go deeply into the jungle where no one goes, or you'll have to find a secluded location where a termite nest is present and in which a Kantasi spirit is hiding / occupying. As for some of you might be wondering that what the deal is with the termites. Do the termites in the nest automatically die when that spirit takes up refuge in that nest, or what happens to the termites? As far as I know and I'm concerned, nothing happens to these termites. Bugs, generally speaking, are unaffected by spirits because bugs themselves are not nearly as developed as a mammal, just the average mammal. I mean, bugs have a very primitive consciousness, arguably. But bottom line is that they're little to not affected by that spirit. And I'm going to close off with a story, a true story locally, dating back to colonial times. That's why I mentioned it in the beginning, where I read a story and I confirmed the legitimacy of that story. When back in the day, in primitive times when the Dutch occupied here, they used cheap laborers, of course, foreigners, immigrants. They used cheap laborers to clear the jungle because back in the day you had no bulldozers, you had no cranes, you had nothing of the sort, no heavy equipment or heavy machinery. So they simply used cheap laborers that used machetes to hack down the jungle, and they frequently came into contact with all kinds of paranormal disturbances, things that they couldn't explain right away. And one of those is that Kantasi spirit, and one of those workers took down one of those Kantasi nests, or a nest in which a Kantasi spirit was hiding, a termite nest, of course. And he said that when it started foaming heavily, some foam accidentally fell on his hand, and as a result, it produced an unnatural but permanent form of arthritis. So basically, his hand turned into this. Local people, Surinamese people, call it kokobe. That's pronounced Kokobe. That's simply arthritis, but it was obviously due to the astral energy and due to that Kantasi spirit being ticked off or pissed off, and him making it angry. And he went to the doctor, but the doctor had no way to explain rationally because there was nothing wrong with his hand from a physical or medical perspective, and there was nothing that they could do. Medical so-called experts back in those days, we're talking about 1950, 1940, let's just say 10 to 15 years after World War II had ended. They simply couldn't explain it. So his hand stayed like that permanently. And that's the danger in dealing with such a spirit. When you come too close to its nest, it starts to feel threatened, and that is an example of what can happen when things go wrong. So that is pretty much it on the Kantasi spirit. And I'm also going to leave maybe other useful links in the description below, aside from the video back when I went to the village Kasipora. I'm going to leave additional links, perhaps optionally, for those of you that are interested. But keep in mind that you won't find anything in English on this subject, so it's going to be in Dutch. But I've explained in a simple, straightforward way what the Kantasi phenomenon is, or as the locals call it, Kantasi or Kantamasi. So that's it in any case. Thanks for watching. Bye. See you until the next video.